And in this video, we're going to take a look at Michael Steele and Jack Wombs, the two men who were convicted of the triple murder of Patrick Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe. We're going to look at some of the smaller and some of the also larger aspects of this case and see if it really ties in with what we know of these two individuals.
Hello. Hello, please. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now, the first topic that I'm going to cover in this video is Darren Nichols. A lot of people in the comment section to my videos often ask, was there really any need for Darren Nichols to be the getaway driver on the evening of December the 6th? If Steele and Wombs were in fact going to go through with this triple murder of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe being killed down Workhouse Lane, then could they not have just parked up a getaway vehicle somewhere close by, made their way on foot, and obviously made good their escape? Is the very use of Darren Nichols an oversight on behalf of Steele and Wombs? I can't really imagine thinking that this is going to be most likely the most important event of their lives at this point, Steele and Wombs. You know, this is everything, isn't it? If this goes well, they get away with it, then fine. If they get caught, then the rest of their lives, or the vast majority of their lives going forward, is going to be spent behind bars with their freedom stripped from them. So would you really use Darren Nichols, someone who, I guess you wouldn't call him the closest of companions in terms of Steele and Wombs. Steele and Wombs appear very close, but would you bring in more of an outsider in Darren Nichols to fulfill that important role of being the getaway driver that night? And then combining that with the fact that supposedly Darren Nichols didn't even know he was going to be the getaway driver that night. Surely that is fraught with difficulties and potential danger. For instance, Steele being in the Range Rover, having no idea whatsoever where Darren Nichols is going to be parked whilst he's waiting for this execution to take place, having no idea really where they're going to be picked up from, having no idea really what time that's going to be. Are they going to be waiting around for Nichols to reappear, as obviously he doesn't really see the necessity to be there ASAP? Could he have popped off to the wheat sheaf for a quick pint or a cheeky shandy? It was fraught with danger, providing that Darren Nichols was kept completely in the dark as to what was taking place. And then we have the situation surrounding the very getaway vehicle itself, the VW Passat, that wasn't in, I guess you could say, the best of conditions. Now, what sticks out in my mind regarding the getaway vehicle is not so much the condition of the vehicle, but we will get onto that later on in this video, but more to do with the fact regarding the false number plates. Now, according to Darren Nichols, the false number plates are stuck on just before they make their way towards Workhouse Lane. Now, someone like Michael Steele, who appears, and I say appears as I don't know him personally, but appears to be quite a thorough person when it comes to his criminal exploits, such as bringing in the gear from Holland, all that sort of stuff. He seems very on top of what he needs to do to avoid capture. So would we really be looking at here two people who hadn't even thought about sticking on those false number plates until the very last second when the vehicle's on its way to Workhouse Lane? Would these plates not have been stuck onto this vehicle way before it even got to the Halfway House pub? And then we ask ourselves about the actual affixing of these false number plates. The fact that Darren Nichols then goes on to describe that Jack Wombs tries to affix these number plates. It's cold, it's wet, it's damp, and the plates won't stick. Now, albeit you don't need to be an engineer to fit a set of false plates to a car, especially if you're using double-sided tape. But would you really simply just give up and chuck those false plates into the back of the car and use the original plates that the vehicle was on? Is that a wise move? Is that something that you would do if you were committing triple murder? Or would you find some way at least to actually affix these false plates? And then we move on briefly to the topic surrounding the use of mobile phones. Now, Wombs and Steele supposedly used their own mobiles on the night of the murder. Now, surely if these two are in fact guilty of this crime or had some involvement in these murders, then this was a huge monumental oversight on behalf of these two, and in particular Michael Steele. But for me, where the questions begin to arise is when we take a look back at the runs from Holland, when they were bringing in the gear from Holland, the fact that they use long-distance radios, walkie-talkies, radios, whatever you want to call them. Yet on the night of the murder, a much more serious crime, they're actually using their own mobile phones in order to communicate, particularly between Wombs and Nichols, for that call to be picked up. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Wombs and Steele were master criminals by any stretch of the imagination, that they were flawless in their planning of their criminal activities. After all, they nearly got caught bringing in that consignment from Holland. They've had some near run-ins in the past. But would they really be so careless as to use their own mobile phones on the evening of the murders? One point I guess is worth mentioning is that mobile technology was incredibly new, or fairly new I should say, at the time of these murders. But Michael Steele seemed to be pretty clued up in terms of phone bugging and phones being traced, hence the reason he used to supposedly use phone boxes in order to evade that. Yet we are somehow led to believe that on the night of the murders this was merely an oversight, that it was okay, it was totally fine for Jack Wombs to leave Darren Nichols to roam as he pleased whilst waiting for that phone call to be picked up from the end of Workhouse Lane. Now let's move back briefly to Darren Nichols' very inclusion in these murders. Was there really a need for a third person if Michael Steele and Jack Wombs are in fact guilty of this crime? Well, I can see the reason behind it. I can see the fact that you would need that car, you would need that driver to be somewhere close by, possibly as a lookout, possibly as a watcher as to what was going on around the perimeter of the crime scene. But would you choose Darren Nichols to be that very person, the person who was working that day in Sunbury-on-Thames, which is near, I believe, Heathrow Airport, as far as I can remember? It was a very long trip for him to get anywhere near to Rettendon that evening. Would it be him who was chosen at the very last minute, just merely hours before the murder took place, in the weather conditions as they were, with intermittent snow, with congested roads, congested motorways as they were on December the 6th, 1995? Now, obviously we need to factor in the possibility or the potential for Wombs and Steele's guilt. And if that is the case, if they are in fact guilty of this crime, then Darren Nichols clearly had to know exactly what was going on that day. It just doesn't make any sense to be so far away from the meeting point, to be so far away from where this crime is going to be committed. It doesn't make any sense to involve someone like Darren Nichols who has no prior knowledge of what is about to take place. It is far, far too risky. I think it's also interesting when you take a look at Darren Nichols' testimony as to what he did after supposedly dropping Jack Wombs off at the lane. Jack Wombs gets out, gets a bag and a coat from the back of the vehicle. Nichols turns right towards a petrol station, turns around, heads and parks in the Wheatsheaf pub car park. He has a lousy signal, so he drives up past the lane and takes the first left. Now, it has been surmised in a documentary many years ago that he took the very first left past the lane, which would take him up to Rettendon Hall, but having driven up there myself, I don't see that as a viable possibility. So he's gone past that turning I should say, and taken the next one into the residential area. Now, surely all of these factors have to be taken into consideration when planning this crime. The fact that this Volkswagen Passat is driving around, parking up in different places, could be seen by various different people waiting. A suspicious-looking, chubby guy sitting in the driver's seat with curly black hair, constantly staring at his phone, looking dishevelled and nervous possibly. Yet that doesn't seem to be, yet again, taken into consideration during the planning process of these murders. And when we look at the overview, I guess you would call it, as to how this crime was committed, the fact that it was just before 7 PM, at least in my opinion, when Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered. The fact that this was a busy A road through to Southend back in the day, and albeit the weather conditions weren't very favourable for driving, this still would have been fairly busy during that time period. The sheer risk involved in having 3 people leave the scene of a triple murder, pulling back out onto that main road, pulling back out potentially into the path of oncoming traffic, as Darren Nichols describes in his testimony. And yet we have not one verified eyewitness who has come forward, as far as I'm aware, to say that this beige Volkswagen Passat pulled out of the lane. This very vehicle travelled along Main Road with 3 occupants inside, 2 of them of which were covered in blood. No eyewitness reports that I've seen even exist of an eyewitness account describing these events. If you'd like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, why not drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts and feelings on this particular video, and maybe a theory that you have of your own. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.